Welcome to The Art of Growth. I'm Jim Zartman.
And I'm Joel Hubbard, and we're talking about the teamer instinct today. A couple things to know about the teamer instinct is I always like to start out with one line that generalizes the idea, the concept of each of the instincts. And for this one, it is for the greater good of the whole. That's always front and center for this instinct. And so when we're thinking about that, it has to include how do you get people to both participate? How do you get people to feel like they belong? And to me, it has a couple components. One is that it knows how to help people feel like they're participating in something, like they want to be there. Like I want you as a social type or a teamer type, I want you to be part of this group. I want you to be part of this endeavor. And I'm going to make it so that it's easier for you to engage. Like I'm going to give you the tools. I'm going to help you with how to step in. I'm going to give you something that you can do here that gets you engaged almost immediately. As we're assuming this in terms of a team, but this also shows up in family systems as well.
Yeah.
Like participating for the whole.
Yeah, communities, wherever. And I want to deal with this misconception right at the beginning because I think it's a stumbling for some people who are trying to figure out where they are, they're identifying, which is this idea that the social or teamer instinct is extroverted or outgoing or always wanting to be with people, that they're highly social in the common parlance. And that's just not true. We talk about this in the new book, and there's a link in the description of this episode, but the new book, Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers, that we're talking through, we talk about how this type can be either extroverted or introverted in the common terms. Like, again, those aren't really accurate terms, but they're very commonly used. So I want to be clear about that, that some are more extroverted, some are more introverted, but it's about this attention. So when we're talking about the developmental evolutionary term of social instinct, we think about herds, we think about the herd wanting to have safety in numbers by traveling together to make sure that we're all okay. So there's attention to the group for group survival, group safety, and it's also true for predatory animals. So animals that hunt together to take down larger prey, including that's what humans were, right? So humans work together to take down something that could feed the whole group, and that's why they would work and collaborate in larger numbers. But as this instinct has evolved and developed, I can't remember if I have posted the video or not, but I was talking about how I know we have all the three instincts in us because we all want to have a sense of adventure, of excitement in our lives. And that's that hunter instinct. We all want some safety, some security, some stability in our lives. It's that farmer instinct. And in the modern sense, we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to feel like we are attached to something larger than ourselves, and not just for survival, but also for meaning. And we're in this series through talking about this book in meaningful work, that we want to be a part of something that we feel like matters. And this is the instinct that pulls at us, that makes us want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's an important part to understanding the framework for what it's like to be inside the skin of a teamer, that this is something that draws attention.
Yeah, it's a perspective of the whole rather than of the parts, I think. It includes the parts, but it has the perspective of how the parts work together and form this sort of larger thing called the whole. And now we can conceptualize, I think anybody can. I think it doesn't matter what your dominant instinct is. You can conceptualize that, of course. You know, we're all parts of a whole, right?
Right.
But those with the teamer instinct, I think you tend to see the whole. I mean, it's a little bit more envisioned for you, I think. It's not something that's a peripheral. It's not something that's secondary. It's something that's primary. Yeah. And so that attention to the things like the culture that a group creates or that a group has, that's something that I've noticed teamer types tend to have a bit more than the others is paying attention to what's the environment, what's the culture, how do I shift? I've thought about this in terms of even the sort of thermostat thermometer and contrast that you've brought up before with a particular type, that I think this also applies to the instinct. It's an interesting thing that you have some who, because of their sense of the whole, sense of what's happening at a larger level, will respond by trying to adjust the atmosphere, trying to adjust the culture a little bit towards something that needs to be done, right? And others are more adaptive, but they're still going to move it through their adaptation. They're just going to, like, I'm more of a, say, thermometer, so I'm feeling the temperature of the space.
Yep.
But I'm not going to go at it with sort of like any push energy at shifting something. I'm going to be more like, I'm going to get inside, I'm going to be part of this, and I'm going to contribute to shifting it over the course of time. I have a friend like that who said, well, that's how you change groups, is you first participate, you belong, and you work at changing it from the inside out. So it was more of that, like, participatory, I'm involved, I'm doing my part, you're doing your part, but I'm going to try to at least shift a little bit the movement in the direction of the whole of this group or this institution.
Well, a huge part as far as caring about a network and wanting to be along in it is earning the right to speak into it, like earning a voice to have into the space. And I can't speak for all teamers, but I can speak for myself, as this is my dominant instinct, that growing up, it's not that I always knew how to manage groups, but there is always a lot of attention given to those who could. Those who could bring the room together, those who could get people on a mission together, who seem to have this ability to speak in an inspiring way or an engaging way or a factual way or influential, whatever it was, they were able to communicate and connect people so that those people could have a sense of being part of something bigger themselves and were inspired to do so. And so even when it came to like the class clown on a bus on a ski trip when I was like in junior high, and I was watching this guy like run the room and going, how does he do that? How is he holding court like that? How is he making everyone who has to be stuck on an hour and a half bus ride have a better time? And all of that was something I was super tuned into. So there's like this attunement to not necessarily you automatically have this ability to do that, but your attention goes to it. So you start to want to build the skill. You desire to go, that seems meaningful to me to interact with the world in this way, that you're making something better for the whole.
Yeah. There's a story or a part of an explanation given by in Plato's Republic on, I think it's Socrates, describing the difference between true leaders and those who are trying to grab a hold of the of power. And he does so with the analogy of a boat and how there were those who wanted to fight for position, fight for control of where to move the boat, the direction to move it in. And he described them, and I think it was sort of saying, these are the politicians of the day. They're grabbing a hold of power as a means to controlling, right? Yeah. And then he says, and then there are those who are looking up at the stars, and maybe they're viewed as foolish. Now, this is not a quote, but this is sort of the idea. Looking foolish because they're looking up. They're not grabbing a hold of control. And so who's the true navigator? The navigator is the one that's looking up at the stars and actually knows where the boat should go. And I've thought about that when it comes to teamers, minus narcissism, minus a big ego trip. I think that there's something there where navigators and, you know, the instinct, the social or the teamer instinct pays attention to what is the role that I can play to serve the whole.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily I want to be in charge, though some end up there, many do, but more so how can I participate in making the whole better? That's important. Back to your early clarification around the difference between, say, or the confusion people have around the social nomenclature for that instinct of being extroverted, of being highly like gregarious and needing to be, you know, always with groups and with people, misses the point. The point is very much what I was just saying is the attention goes to what part can I play? What part can other people play? How can we be part of this greater good here? And again, that'll play itself out very differently from type to type, but you'll tend to see more of that as the focus of attention, as opposed to, I need to be in charge.
Right.
Or, or I don't want any involvement at all. It's more of that middle space, which I think I find interesting and you mentioned at another point, that idea of the generalist, and maybe you can take it there a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting data point that we have started to notice more and more as more people have taken the test and have been on podcasts and we've had one-on-one conversations with. And this pretty decent data set now of going, it really looks like the teamer has this generalist over specialist disposition, where it's been interesting for me whenever people like even ask me about my background in doing this or just in my history. I have a really weird mixed background. I think skill collecting in order to serve the greater network has always been a gift to me. And I think for a lot of people, they feel less than or a little bit weird about their story because it seems like they've jumped around a lot or they've been a part of different things because they were probably in an environment where something was needed and they thought, well, I can at least contribute to the whole by learning, adapting, and serving in that way. And whether it was in a leadership capacity or a specific skill set. And I think I'm probably not the only teamer type of person out there who goes, man, I've been all over the place and I've had all these different experiences. Or even if you've had a more direct line, a certain kind of a career in a very specific field, you've probably moved around a little bit more even within that world. Mm-hmm. And so I got a lot of comfort actually in a book that has been popular that Susie recommended to me called Range: Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialist World, mm-hmm. where there is this sense of, I want to do what's needed. I can probably figure that out. That is part of having a wide perspective and looking into the wider network of how things are done and going, well, how do I serve in this way? I made a list earlier, I think end of last year or something, about all the different jobs I've done within Art of Growth, even with us doing this the last few years. And I think there was like 14 things on it. And it's really funny because, I mean, not even the average person may know that, like, I come from an audio background. I first proposed we did this and then edited. I produced our whole audiobook. Any piece of music you hear is something that I've composed and used on the episode. And that's just on the pre-production side, let alone video editing and writing and training and coaching and teaching and like all of these different realms, not to mention all the behind the scenes business stuff that I'm not like the greatest, most organized person of all time, but I used to be really bad at it. And I was in an environment that it really required a lot. And I was pressured to get better at it. So I did. Mm-hmm. And I ended up learning how to put some structure around. And when people are like, hey, can you reach back out on this date? I've got emails scheduled to go out a month, 2 months, 3 months into the future in my system right now, because that's part of that thing that I've had to learn. And I think the generalist point is that you want to take on different skills because it serves the whole. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where that can get lost in the world of business is someone was reflecting on how hunters and farmers are very valued in the business world because they are doers and pursuers. And so you
have a great phrase, doers and pursuers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have roles that are clearly defined in companies that one or the other, will fit.
Well, it's so much easier to write a job description for a specialist than it is for a generalist.
It really is. It really is. And one of the challenges for teamers is to define what it is that they do. Yeah. I mean, unless you have a specialty and you're a teamer, it's like, well, I'm really good at making lattes. It's like, that's real specific. And okay, great. But what if you say, well, I'm good at influencing people? Well, how do you measure that?
Yeah.
Well, you can measure it because you can measure it over the course of time as to, is your team producing? And I think that has to be something that is thought of. I mean, certainly plenty of organizations actually do that. They value like the team success and are you capable of moving the team in a particular direction?
Right.
But talking to a CEO the other day who is a teamer said, no, it's entirely that. My capacity, my influence is not measurable. And as a result, my organization struggles because I'm pushing towards team and I'm pushing towards, growth, but done through teams. And I'm in an institution that functions primarily as a farmer institution, So it's very difficult for people to sometimes see the benefit of that, but it needs to be something I think that we talk a little bit more about is people come to work not just for a paycheck.
Right.
People come to work for a whole lot more, and things included in that are, I want a sense of being able to feel like my contribution matters.
Yeah.
Like I want to know that I'm having an impact on the organization. I also want to know that maybe I do care about belonging and being part of a group of people. Maybe the people that I work with are just as important to me as the role itself. And that is true for a number of people. And that's what causes teams to function, at a better level is when there's a good vibe. We know this in sports.
Yeah.
If a team is falling apart internally,
they're not going to play well.
They're not going to play well.
No.
Right? So sports knows this. There's no question in their minds. A good leader creates this sense of togetherness, this sense of bonding and affiliating, this sense of connection, as well as, contributing at a high level.
Which is why we tell companies we don't think you should talk about your company as being like a family. It's not. It should be talked about like it's a professional sports team, because that's what an organization has to be. They have to be a professional sports team that's accomplishing something together. Now, we talk about in the book these 3 core attributes for each of the instincts. And what we've been talking about here a little bit is this fostering contribution. And I want to talk a little bit about a mixed side of this, because on the frustrated side, if people aren't contributing, if people aren't living up to their potential, if people could be doing something but they seem out for themselves, and it is that ego thing, the teamer instinct resists that because it wants people to have a positive influence. It wants people to step up to the bat and to reach their goals, to do it for others, to be a part of something bigger than yourselves. And it doesn't even always have to come from you. I've talked about this in other places where it's so encouraging to me. It's one of the highs that I get when I invest in someone, they succeed, and I get to stand back and just cheer for them, and then other people celebrate them. I feel a huge level of satisfaction from that. I feel a huge boost that I have been a part of something important because they are thriving. And then I can go do this other thing over here. And so I don't need to be doing the thing that gets celebrated. But if I'm supporting it in lots of different areas, that's what feels like success to me. It's not like I have this achievement. If I made everyone better, that feels like a greater achievement to me than anything else.
Yeah, well, that's an intuition that you possess as a social type or a teamer type that other instincts won't possess, at not nearly at that level.
Right.
So, I've said this before. I feel like at times it's like, go, accelerate. Oh, wait, you're accelerating too much. Brake. It's like this sort of like, how much do I invest? How little do I invest, right? Or for me, it has shown up oftentimes in competition, where I'm competitive and I want to win, but my winning can also harm if it's not measured. And as a younger person, I certainly didn't measure it at all. And so the result was that I never intuited how much intensity to put in something and how much to hold back, right? Whereas the way you're describing this is there's an intuition around measuring for the sake of the whole. And it's a measuring of how much you put in, what you put in, and, if someone's holding back too much, you can pick that up and you're like, hey, what's going on?
Yep.
And that can feel what you said, selfish, or, that can feel like,
or insecure or whatever it is, like whatever needs to be managed.
Yeah.
Because contribution, collaboration, cooperation, all those are interdependent to me. They are incredibly important. And so something like competition that you bring up, it's only helpful to the extent that it is helping with those other aspects. When it's part of, cooperation, it's part of making a contribution. So this is one of the things I like about the jiu-jitsu environment. There is a aspect of it that is competitive. When you go through your 4-minute rolls and you're seeing, who can get into what position, who can dominate, who can submit the other person. Yes, there's a competitive aspect of that. But if someone comes in and they're way too competitive, they're like blasting through people, they're hurting people, they're not being conscious of the fact that we're actually all here to make each other better. If they're a little more advanced and they're just decimating beginners, like that's not a way to live. And that person is going to be dealt with and they're probably going to be, dismissed. If people are holding back too much and they're not really challenging themselves, they're trying to play it safe too much, they, get held back. They don't get promoted. They don't really get better. And so they end up self-selecting out and getting frustrated because it's this, what you're trying to create is an environment where everyone gets better, everyone thrives, everyone can contribute, and you do it by cooperation. Mm-hmm. And so this is why one of these major components of the social instinct, which has to show up, this teamer instinct has to show up in every kind of environment where lots of people have to do a thing together. Yeah. Whether it's essentially an individual sport like that, like racquetball, or even in a team environment where everyone has to participate in the right way. But there's a measuring, there's a timing, there's a reading the perspective, reading the room. Where do we put our energies? Because teamers, especially in an organization, they have a good sense of where to put our energies because they're going, well, we're not really going to survive if we try to do this because this other group is going to be able to do way more with that than we could, but we can find a specific niche. You and I have been talking about the book 0 to 1 lately. It's like, well, why would I compete and why would I create kind of a competition when I can just be original and then there's no competition? Mm-hmm. I'm laughing because I'm thinking there's a book that some people expected us to write, but I'm like, there's other things out there and I'm not trying to write something out that's like what's out there already. So we even wrote this in a way that we want to say something different about the instincts than other people are saying. Like all of that is part of trying to have a contribution to a space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a thermometer and a thermostat kind of approach to this teamer instinct.
Yeah.
I've watched how some, depending upon the personality type, will notice the culture, and this is something that it's taken me a bit to really understand. Teamer is my second, so I have a bit more access to it, but still, it's not the first thing that I go to is picking up on the culture or the atmosphere of the whole. I pick up on individuals, and I can pick up on like, oh man, this feels really like hard. Like people aren't really engaged today, or people are struggling, or I can pick up on some of that. But the teamer instinct picks up on a lot more of that atmosphere. Yeah. And then some will take more of the thermostat approach. Like, I'm going to change the atmosphere here. I'm going to move through my personality, through my charisma, through my strength to make that happen. And I think others take more of I'm going to have a more participatory approach to this. I'm going to do some stuff. It's more dutiful types, that I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my work, but I'm very attentive to there's a dynamic here that I want to shift. And so I've noticed that too. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, there's definitely people who are that thermometer. I want to read the room and kind of go along with it, because if I go along with it, then a couple different things. One, if I do my part, then I'm setting a good example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or I'm earning a voice.
Right.
And I think earning a chance to speak into it is a big part of that.
That's what you'll notice some who are quieter in terms of that instinct, the teamer instinct.
Yeah, some who have this instinct, they're more reserved, they're more quiet. they're more held back, but they still want to participate, right? And others that they want to be the thermostat, they want to change the temperature in the room, they want to set the direction, they want to lead, they want to have that. And they're very attuned, though, that I have to earn this voice in this room. So how do I go about doing that?
Yeah.
So both of those definitely come into factor when it comes to this contribution. But let's talk about one of the other factors, which is this building connection piece.
Yep.
Because it definitely looks different. And when teamers think about connection, they think about it in a different way. Because part of it is a sense that I have a sense of belonging to a group, to a network, but I also want to build connections that I'm even not a part of. I love the fact that my wife is in a book club with some other women. Most of those women met each other through me. My wife met all of them because of me, and I'm not a part of the group. And yet it feels like a huge success to me that I was able to build a connection that I'm not a part of. I love hearing when I've connected a couple people and they are now working together or they've become really close. And all I did was foster the connection. And so building connection is as important as having connection.
Yeah, that to me is a real marker of this instinct.
Yeah.
Because I don't know of anybody else who would say, who doesn't have that as their dominant instinct, who says that. What's funny is how many times those with that instinct say that. My gosh, I mean, I could tell you in the last 3-4 months, I've heard from a number of them say, they don't know each other, by the way, either. And they'll say to me, well, yeah, when it comes to connection, my greatest joy is, and I'll lay down on the pillow at night and reflect on my day, and I get so much joy from the connections I helped others make with each other.
Huge, yeah.
And when that person said that, I thought, I don't relate much to that. Like, I relate some, but not much. I never think about all the connections I helped create, even though teamer is my second. So I do think it has to be in that prime position where then that instinct, people do feel that great thrill from that. I had a buddy of mine say to me, hey, Joel, remember that guy you introduced to me years ago? Yeah, I thought you guys would get along well. I vaguely remember that, but yeah. He's like, yeah, we've been best friends ever since, like best of friends. And we hang out all the time. We vacation together. He showed me, sent me some pictures. It's like we vacation together, all the stuff. And he could not be more effusive.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, it registered maybe a 4 or 5 on my happy meter.
Yeah.
Like, it did not give me the juice that my instinct gives me. And that's an important thing to note. That's what helps diagnose, like, where am I on this? And is this my dominant? Is this my second? It has been a consistent theme for those with this instinct to look around at the connections that they create and find great joy in that. So, yeah, that was a very interesting
I want to relate to more people than I can be in relationship with. So a way to relate to them is connecting them with others. And I'm very okay with like a temporary, there's a lot of connection for a time to move through a particular thing, and then you're off on your own. And I've had people come back and be like, oh, I'm sorry I haven't talked or followed up in months or even a couple years, but, and I'm like, I'm fine. Like, there's no problem with that. Like, did I serve the greater purpose in your life and you're thriving more, but you have your own network? I don't need to constantly be in it. In fact, I'm trying to do that now with some other people, so I don't have as much time because I want them to be good, and then they're doing their thing, But then there's people that I want, consistently around me and in my circle. Like, it's just the whole is more important than any of the individual relationships.
Yeah.
And I think this impacts every area. I think it impacts, being married, that I don't put too much on my spouse of roles that she needs to play in my life. Like, there's certain things that we do together well, and then there's a lot of other people in my life that provide resources that she doesn't. Things that I want to talk about or think about or go do. And being someone who's interested in a lot of things, I would exhaust her.
Yeah.
I tried to pull her into all the stuff that I'm interested in and part of, or I just, fell down the rabbit hole of. But on this building connection thing, it's really important that there's energy that goes towards building connections for the sake of the whole, not building connections just for the sake of the self. That is a distinctive feature of this one. And then the last feature that we talk about as far as the core attributes is this reading and interpreting. So teamers are really tuned into reading, body language, little even micro expressions and word usage, or lots of different things to figure out where someone is coming from, because they're trying to figure out a lot of things like, is this person safe? Is this a good person to be around? Do I get a spidey sense that I don't trust this person? You want to see a teamer beat themselves up for something, it's going to be, I knew and I didn't do anything about it. Or I didn't even see it. Did someone trick me? Like, this is a problem. But
I think, though, that's going to show up. I want to qualify this because it's very important. There are a lot of other types besides the one with this dominant instinct that goes through that same process. I certainly do. Tons of hunters have told me I'm always reading and interpreting, so I'm confused by that. Certain types that are oriented, like heart types, will definitely say, oh, I'm always reading and interpreting, and I'm picking stuff up and measuring if they're safe, they're not safe. So I think that the uniqueness of that reading and interpreting when it comes to the teamer instinct has to do with the reading and interpreting inside the larger context of for the sake of the whole.
Right.
So could you make that connection?
Right. Yeah. So it is the reason I'm reading. Like, what am I reading for? And I'm reading to make sure that this person is going to be beneficial to the whole. But there's also a part that is on the individual side, like not wanting them to make me look bad in front of the group. Oh, so how do they impact how I'm seen in the wider, because if I don't see something about them and then I put them in, I do this thing I talked about, which is I help them excel, and then they do something in that arena that looks bad toward me, then I feel like I'm going to lose credibility in that whole and in that network. And so one of the reasons that I think this system turns on with the teamer instinct is about reading people and facial expressions, and their overall energy is a big thing. It sounds woo-woo or it's hard to describe, but all of us have had the experience. We get around certain people and we're like, oh no, something isn't right here. And then some people have that, it's just on all the time. And some people have had that more rare. But for that teamer instinct, this is something that's going on pretty consistently, is like reading the energy because of what it can impact. Yeah,
and I'm going to make the connection to, like, I read and interpret, this person looks good, the energy around them looks good. They're going to help be part of the group, and they're going to do a good job within the group. So I like that, right? Yep. But once I've made that connection, if I'm not teamer dominant, I'm going to make that connection because I think, they'll help the team. They're going to help. And then I'm done. I don't get any reward from that.
Yeah, gotcha.
You know what I mean? And I think that's the interesting connection. It's a neutral thing.
Gotcha.
Right? So I can imagine a number of folks out there going, well, I do that all the time. I hire people. I bring people into the team, or introduce someone to my family because I think my wife would love to meet this person, or my husband, or whatever, my partner. This is the sort of like neutral space that I think a lot of us inhabit, but it doesn't get to that larger thing of like, there's a reward system to each of the instincts.
For sure.
And I think that's the thing that makes it very unique, is like the reward system of the farmer, the reward system of the hunter, and the reward system of the teamer are uniquely different.
Really good. It's definitely has to do with the reward system, but part of that reward system is a safety mechanism of making sure that I'm safe within the group by making this kind of a contribution.
Gotcha.
So that's why it has a reward to
it,
because
survival, and that's the survival part of the instinct.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's why it has a reward center to it, because that reward is what's going to keep us safe in the network. And while we're talking about reward, let's talk about cost. So when the teamer is a blind spot for individuals, the consistent thing I've seen is they often have a hard time picking safe people. They often have a hard time knowing who to hire, who to date, who to be friends with, and they tend to have a lot of stories about people who have done them wrong.
Dude, literally this I laugh because there was someone in our certification
It's not funny,
course
it's sad, but
who
yes.
does not have that, who has that as their repressed,
Yeah.
and said, I'm not allowed to hire anybody in my company.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because every hire I've made has been bad.
Yeah.
And it was done humorously. So, that was kind of the awareness. Because once you become aware of it, you realize you've got a strength that comes from your dominant instinct. And it's just as powerful and wonderful as the other instincts. And so you can relax around that and kind of laugh about it and go, you know what? This is an area I've consistently failed in. So what do I do? Well, I now interview. I'm part of the interview process, but I'm not the one making the final decision.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the hiring chapter we talk about, it's a good idea to have some teamers in your hiring process, but we give the qualifier that make sure when you're interviewing them, teamer, that you're not trying to make them feel included, but you are considering how they're going to impact everyone else. Because that can also happen in that space, is that you can want to make them feel included. Like I've always wanted to make people feel included, to be a part, and I always believe the best in everyone. Right when we were wrapping up and I was reading the first draft of the book for the first time. I was at a coffee shop and my friend walked in and surprised me with another person who works for her who I haven't seen in a while. And we were talking about this instinct and he's like, oh man, this is my issue is that I want to include everyone. I want to make them feel like they belong. I give them way too much of the benefit of the doubt. So there's one mechanism that wants to include and wants to make them belong and have a sense of belonging. And there's this flip side that sometimes I give people like too much credit. I hope they'll figure it out and they won't have a negative impact on the whole.
That's one of the weaknesses in terms of firing.
Yeah.
Right? Because the teamer instinct, it's like, you would think it would be like, well, if it's for safety, then I'd be quick to terminate people. But they're not quick to terminate people.
No. Because you really believe in the person's potential that people can figure things out. Like that's the generalist perspective, is that people will be able to figure things out. They will rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
They will be able to navigate the situation. And sometimes it's just not the case.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed the spectrum too, which is fascinating to me in the world of the Enneagram, is how in some cases the teamer instinct strengthens the type a bit more. And in some cases, it softens the type a bit more. So it's just a fascinating thing to me that it has this sort of measuring again. It measures things. It's like, okay, your type tends to being a bit too soft in general. Like you're going to just always nurture, but you're not going to challenge. But then when you add the teamer instinct, all of a sudden you see a challenging edge to that.
Yep.
And so it's been fascinating to me to watch that happen. And like sometimes we call them a bit of a counter to that type. Well, that's what you notice. And so then when you see a type that would tend to be more challenging and more confrontational, well, what happens when they have that teamer instinct? It softens them a bit.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's been I don't know what to make other than to say that that's an interesting observation I've had.
Well, this is why we say that the instincts are so much better of a nuancing tool for the Enneagram than wings or tri-types or anything else. It's like this is the thing that helps.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll just bring this up because it's been on my mind this week on how like the instincts are not an extension of the Enneagram. They are not like this continuation. They are not dependent on the Enneagram. And that was what I think some people were expecting with, the book is like that we would go into all the different Enneagram aspects. And we said, we'll probably do that at some point.
Oh, definitely we will. Yeah.
But for right now, like it's important to understand that as far as understanding, navigating your environment, working with your team, these stand alone just fine. And my goal is that companies will use the instincts instead of doing another like simple tool, because it's a simple tool, but instead of using one of these other ones like Insights or Hogan or Predictive Index or DISC, that they'll use the instincts and then that will seamlessly, when they wanted to go deeper, go into the types.
Well, let me add a layer to that because I think that the instincts are helping people to understand from a diagnostic standpoint where they are, what their particular strengths are. But we've really addressed we've addressed a little bit more than primarily, but a lot of it has been around the survival piece of it.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole other section that I'm wanting to develop, which is the thriving side of the instinct.
Yeah.
Which I think then you can make it a standalone product because it no matter what your Enneagram type is, you will recognize you are not living fully into the dominant instinct. Nobody is.
Yeah.
And nobody has developed high levels of competency in their dominant instinct. Well, I should say people have certainly grown in that. And we've met many people who are living at quite a high level. I believe that there's infinite growth in the space.
Absolutely.
And we have yet to tap that because I think we're still evolving. I think we're still developing. I think our consciousness is still developing.
For sure.
And so you realize like, ooh, the high side of this instinct, I just noticed that in another person that I don't possess that. Oh my, I still have some growth to do. And then you can start to move toward that. And I think that then it shows up like, oh, that's my type, my personality type that's resistant to that part of the instinct. Or that's my personality type that's overdoing this part of the instinct as a means to survive. And what it looks like at its thriving, and I'll just give this as an example, in the case of my hunter instinct, I underplayed the one-to-one component of that for a long time.
Yeah.
It still was there. People still felt it.
The environment silenced it in you, and you were forced to exile it.
Right. And so while I was doing this sort of hunter chasing something new and running after the next thing, I did a lot of that. But the thriving really took me to that next level of how can you use that instinct as a means to serving others and as well as meeting your own core need, the need of the instinct at the survival level, which is like, I need change. I need, but you need change. But how can that change be really profoundly helpful to other people? And that is where you start to see the thriving part of it, where it starts to really help people and you have more agency. It's not the thing is running you. You're starting to be able to run it.
Yeah.
And I think that we've yet to develop enough of that, but that's something that I see as next for us.
Yeah. I mean, we start tapping into that a bit in the book because we were talking about like what gets created. We talk about, in organizations, whether they're starting a new organization or they're launching a new thing. We talk about that hunters needing to be in on the front end of things because they're going to see possibility and creation. But if they just, run rampant but don't have some structure behind them, they don't have the farmers come in, giving them that structure, creating a more stable environment around this thing that you're seeing. But then you need these teamers to have it scale, to have it go to a wider network. And like these instincts, they originally existed for survival, but they're actually generative and creative when you fully live into the dominant aspect of them and who you naturally are. And I think when I look back at my life, and I think this is a good evaluation tool, when you look back at your life at the moments you're most proud of, the things you say, I was me in that moment. I was at my best. I was thriving. See how it attaches to your dominant instinct. Because we had a really interesting moment in the corporate certification last week. We were doing this training. I was teaching them how to do this training. And some of them were having a moment because they had seen their instinctual stack. We talk about the stack a lot, your dominant, your secondary, your tertiary, or blind spot. And they'd seen their stack in a certain way when it came to how they've survived and had to navigate their life with their type. But when we flipped the script and said, where do you feel at your best? Where do you thrive? Where do you feel like you're making your greatest contribution? A few of them actually changed their stack. Because they went, if I actually look at this through the lens of how I survive or what I've had to do to make it through, versus I look at where I feel like I'm at my best and what I love, I actually see it differently. And if I look at it through the what makes me thrive and what I love lens, I can actually make different choices that are more generative for my life now.
So, this gets into we could do a whole other episode on instincts as your resource. As resource points, because I believe it's similar to your type that has 2 resource points, your Enneagram type. I think the instinct has 2 resource points. Your dominant always stays the same, but it depends upon which resource it's using as a means to survive and how it's using that. So if it's using it well, it becomes this wonderful way. It actually enhances the dominant instinct. So when you're in survival mode, you're using a different instinct, a secondary instinct, different one to survive as well.
Yeah.
And that is oftentimes what we've noticed happen for people. And when they emerge out of it, when they think about it from a thriving standpoint of like, yeah, like I literally had the same exact conversation on Saturday, I believe, with a client. You know, I've lived out of the farmer for a long time as a hunter. And it was like, yeah, but did it just protect you or did it nurture you?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Oh, it just protected me. It's like,
yeah.
there was no nurture at all. I was like, okay, so there's nothing food-wise. There's nothing,
Right.
You're enjoying about it. It's like, not as much. No,
Ooh, I
for
love
sure.
that.
It's far more protective. It's definitely a resource, but it's also a vehicle. So it's like, I lead through as a hunter first, teamer second. My hunter leads through the teamer. It shows up inside the teamer sphere.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it is a vehicle, but it's also a resource in the sense that when I'm with other teamer or I'm in the teamer world, I find it to be very generative. Like when I'm in that space, if I'm not driving the hunter to make it feel like it's surviving in that space, but I'm more relaxed and I'm in a place of openness, then the feedback loop is generative to me. It's like that space really feeds me. And then I go back and I can create. I just think it's just something that's, again, very new to me. And we'll be exploring this and probably writing on this. There'll be more episodes on this. But this is something that is fascinating to see happen as we're coaching people and as we're growing ourselves.
Yeah, and if you all out there, you have observations about how this has shown up for you, and you start asking those questions, like what helped you survive, and like what nurtures you, and all of this. We do dabble into all of this on the book, but that's like a starting point that we want you to continue the conversation with us. So if you have ideas on this, like I'm sure some more conversations will be coming up, more panels, later in the year. Like all of this is going to contribute to that space. But I'm so thankful that we're able to sort of lay this groundwork, because all of you have been a part of this evolving since the original series in 21. And now we're talking about it at a whole nother level. And I think it is the community, this is very teamer of me, but it is the community in our network that will continue to shape this into making it a more significant contribution. So huge thank you to all of you today. So thanks for listening. You can take the new Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers assessment on our website, theartofgrowth.org. That is our new instincts test. And you can order the Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers book on Amazon now. The link is in the show notes. Based on our interactions, we are also adding content to our Instagram about the topic, which is just Art of Growth. And the best way to support the show is to leave us a review wherever you listen and share this episode with someone else. We're hugely grateful for you doing this work with us. Grace and growth, my friends.